So Riley, my fiance, and I have been wanting to check out Antlers for a few months now, but we were not able to do so around the time it came out in theaters. I think it was Halloween 2021. It didn't do so well at the box office. It only earned, $18.3 million. But fortunately, it's now available on HBO Max. So if you have HBO Max, you too can watch Antlers. We checked it out last night, and so here's my review. We're going to go over non-spoilers, as non-spoilery as possible in the first part of the video, pros, cons review, and then we'll move over to spoilers in the last part of this video. Antlers stars Kerry Russell, who is best known for the TV show Felicity. She plays the main character in Antlers, a teacher, and her brother is played by Jesse Plemons. He plays a character in Breaking Bad. That's what he's best known for. Not one of the main characters, but a reoccurring character throughout the later seasons of Breaking Bad. He also plays a sheriff in the small Oregon town that Antlers is set in. And once again, he is the brother to Kerry Russell's character. And then you have the legendary Graham Greene, who is the former sheriff of this small town in Oregon. And he is a legendary actor, Graham Greene. He's been in so many great movies and TV shows. Plus, for all you Red Dead fans, he voices Rains Fall in Red Dead Redemption 2. And there's obviously other actors and actresses in Antlers. But there's also a young actor that does a phenomenal job playing one of the main characters in Antlers. That's worth noting. Jeremy T. Thomas. He was awesome as Lucas. Very convincing. So I thought he did a great job, because it can go one way or the other with a child actor. Either they come across as very convincing or not so much. But credit to Jeremy T. Thomas. He did a stellar job. Antlers was written and directed by Scott Cooper, produced by Del Toro, and I believe Antlers is loosely based off a novel called The Quiet Boy. It is a horror drama set in a small Oregon town on the decline. It revolves around, a few characters. Once again, the teacher, who's the main character, played by Kerry Russell. Her brother, which is the town sheriff, played by Jesse Plemons. Lucas, a small boy, as well as a former sheriff, Graham Greene, and a creature. We'll talk more about the creature in spoilers. Starting off with the pros, the characters, for the most part, were pretty solid. So I thought that the performances were great from the characters. Well, the main characters, like Kerry Russell's character, who plays the teacher, and Jesse's character, who plays her brother and the town sheriff. And the few moments we get with Graham Greene's character, he does great anytime he's on stage. And of course, once again, Jeremy Thomas as Lucas. They all did a great job. The cinematography is awesome. It looks great. And credit to Scott Cooper for his directing skills. It has a really good look and feel to this during the daytime and especially at night. And the score was pretty decent. The creature design and effects were also really good, in my opinion. So the cons, the final act is kind of weak. The build-up is slow at the beginning, but it's a good build-up, slowly but surely, towards the climax. And then the final act, it kind of is weak. It could have been better. It could have been a little bit longer as well. It was a pretty short film, in my opinion. There could have been more added to the movie for a bit more padding, and I think it would have worked better for the horror vibe that they were trying to go for in this film. But there's typical movie horror cliches and tropes as well that have appeared all too often in a lot of movies and TV shows. They get annoying after a while. But if you're into horror and you already happen to have HBO Max, then I would recommend you check out Antlers. There's definitely good stuff here. It could have been way better, so I would probably give it maybe a 6. I'm going to be generous and I'll give it a 6 out of 10. So, yeah, 6 Antlers out of 10 Antlers for Antlers. So, if you like horror, then you're going to get some horror here. You're also going to get some drama. You're going to get some plot points that, might have been better off, on the editing room floor and replaced by more horror. So, let's talk spoilers, because it's hard to talk about a movie without diving into spoilers. You've been warned. So, if you haven't watched Antlers yet, I guess hit the pause button. Go watch Antlers on HBO Max. If you have HBO Max, then come back and watch the spoiler section. So I do have this huge fascination with cryptids and wendigos, and I've watched a lot of horror YouTube channels that do these true stories, real life true stories, and then some of them revolve around cryptids like wendigos, skinwalkers, Bigfoot, werewolves, etc. So I do have a fascination with wendigos, and that was one reason why I was excited to check out Antlers. And the focus does tend to deviate from what should be basically a popcorn-pleasing horror flick. It focuses a lot on the trauma that the brother and sister characters played by Kerry Russell and Jesse Plemons face when it comes to their late father. Mostly it's the sister's trauma, and it's alluded to that the brother also experienced some trauma because of their father as well. But most of the trauma is focused on Kerry Russell's character. You could allude to the fact that their father wasn't a very nice guy, and he probably did some awful things to both of them, maybe more to Kerry Russell's character than Jesse's character. But once again, I feel like the focus here should have been mostly on the horror aspect of this movie. The movie starts off with Jesse's younger brother and their dad and his dad's friend in a mine, an abandoned mine somewhere in Oregon. They have a little meth lab. I think it's a meth lab. And unfortunately, they run across a Wendigo inside this mine that kills Lucas's dad's friend and wounds Lucas's dad and infects him and possesses him with the spirit of the Wendigo. So Lucas's dad ends up getting locked up in the second floor of their house, and he puts these locks up, and he tells Lucas and his brother not to go up there, to only feed him on like regular occasions, but try to stay away from their father because he's very sick. So even though his dad has a criminal history, a shady character, but also he's trying to be a good father, I suppose, especially since he's obviously knows there's something wrong with him after he's encountered the Wendigo and his friend was killed and now he's infected or possessed by the Wendigo. So he stays up there in the attic, and then somehow Lucas's little brother also gets up there as well. So I guess his little brother gets infected, and Lucas now has to feed his father and his brother, and it's taken a negative toll on Lucas. He's struggling in school. You can tell that he's just having issues. He's not getting much sleep. He's going through a lot of trauma. He's not eating very well. In fact, he's eating rodents, killing skunks, and like bringing home dead raccoons for his father and his brother. And his father is transforming at this point. He's not turned into a Wendigo because one of the qualifications for you to make the full transformation from a human being into a Wendigo is cannibalism. And that goes back to Native American lore. So his father has yet to become a full-fledged Wendigo. So he still has some humanity left in him, but he's obviously losing that battle. And he's turning into kind of like, I guess, a goblin, orc-type character. And he has these like nasty-looking teeth, and he's losing his hair. But I guess his dad still has enough of himself in there to restrain himself from harming either one of his sons. And so Lucas has tried to keep his father and his little brother locked up in the second floor of their house. And he's also trying to keep them fed. And he's also trying to, I guess, keep up appearances by going to school. And his teacher, which is Kerry Russell's character, sees that there's obviously something wrong with this young boy, and she tries to befriend him. She buys him some ice cream, and they talk about some things, or at least she tries to get some information out of him. She can tell that he's suffering through some sort of abuse and trauma because she's also had experienced that in her life as well. And eventually she decides to go to Lucas's house, and she actually does something smart. She goes all the way up to the door, and even though the door is unlocked and opens, she can hear noises upstairs, and she smells, some awful smells from all the dead animals that Lucas has been bringing home for his father and his brother, enough to realize that maybe she shouldn't go inside that house. So she leaves. She tells her brother about it, and her brother, by the way, is the town sheriff once again. And he says that she shouldn't have gone up there. And, she also talks to her boss, which is the principal of the school, about what's going on with Lucas, because Lucas is clearly having issues. He's drawing all these twisted looking artwork about his brother and his father, and he's being picked on by these other boys that are being douchebags to Lucas. So obviously there's something wrong with Lucas, and they've been trying to call Lucas's house, but nobody's answering. And so the principal, she decides that she's going to go up there and pay Lucas's dad a visit. And of course, the sheriff knows all about Lucas's dad because he's been arrested a few times for drug possession. He knows that his dad is, a drug maker and also a drug user. But because Lucas is the only father, because his dad is their only parent, because their mom died some time ago, the sheriff has decided not to do anything further when it comes to, I guess, the legal justice system of Lucas's father. You think that wouldn't really matter because they would just put Lucas and his brother in foster care, but whatever, movies, right? Meanwhile, the former sheriff has been out hunting, and by the way, the former sheriff is played by Graham Greene once again, and he comes across a mangled body, right? And the mangled body happens to be the friend and fellow meth producer of Lucas's dad. So the first Wendigo, which was in the mine, had a nice little snack, but then injured or bit Lucas's dad. So it's kind of confusing about what happened to the first Wendigo. And the logic is there's only one Wendigo, and it possesses one body at a time. So it's not like werewolves, where if a werewolf bites you, you can become a werewolf, and there can be more than one werewolves. In this case, there's only one Wendigo, which really doesn't make sense, to be honest, but okay. But up to a certain point, Lucas's dad and brother have not fully transformed into Wendigos because they have yet to consume human flesh. And unfortunately, the principal decides to go up to Lucas's dad's house. And despite the fact that, she opens the door and she also smells how bad and nasty and foul the house is, she decides, I'm just going to come on into the house. And even though she walks up to the door, that leads up to the attic, to the second floor, whatever, has all these locks on it. Well, she's like, you know what? I'm just going to unlock it and remove this medicine bag. And I'm going to go upstairs. And even though I'm seeing blood on the wall, which looks really sus, I'm just going to keep going up into this attic because, what could possibly go wrong? And she notices Lucas's younger brother. I think his name's Aiden, by the way. I think the little brother's named Aiden. And then, of course, she ends up being lunch for Lucas's dad. And after he consumes the principal, and it's possible that Aiden also had a little bite as well. Well, Lucas's dad finally transforms into the Wendigo, quite literally. The Wendigo's antlers just bust out of the dude's mouth and basically busts out from inside of Lucas's dad. So Lucas's dad, I guess, just became kind of like a cocoon for the Wendigo. And then Lucas's dad, his remains are torn in half. And then you have also the remains of the principal in the attic, and the Wendigo and Aiden are now gone whenever Lucas finally gets home. Or did the cops arrive first? I don't remember. But anyway, so you have the Wendigo on the loose along with Aiden, and then Lucas is walking down the tracks. Yeah, he's walking down the tracks back home, and he gets picked on by one of the bullies that has been bullying him. And then all of a sudden, there's some like animals screaming and howling in the background. They look up in a tree, and then the Wendigo jumps down on the bully and has the bully for a late afternoon evening snack, and Lucas runs off. Now that was awesome, by the way. But one of the issues that I have with Antlers is the fact that this movie needed way more time with the Wendigo, or way more horror scenes, way more kills. They could have had another hiker or hunter or somebody on a bicycle riding around up in the woods, and they could have had 2 or 3 more kills with the Wendigo hunting people left and right. But unfortunately, there is, I guess you could say, a drought between kills. After the bully gets killed, then it becomes nightfall. Then eventually somebody stumbles across the boy. And then see Kerry Russell's character and the sheriff, I think the night before or whenever, the night before, they take Lucas to the hospital. And then Lucas is getting fluids pumped back into him. And then he's flashbacking about, the day his father came back after being, I guess, infected or possessed by the Wendigo. And that's when they get a lot of backstory there. Then eventually, Kerry Russell and Jesse's characters, the teacher, sheriff, brother-sister duo, go to the former sheriff, and then he basically just dumps all the information regarding the Wendigo on them. So I know I'm leaving things out, but that's just the way it is. I really think that this was a mistake because I wanted to see more of Graham Greene's character involved in this movie, and I think one of the ways they could have done that is they could have had him go out there and doing the investigation, because he's the one who comes across the body, right? And the woods, and you think that would have driven him to want to find out what's going on. Meanwhile, obviously, there's only one other sheriff and one deputy out there. So the small town doesn't exactly have a huge law enforcement. So they could have given Graham Greene more time and then have him either go up to, the nearby reservation or go to the library, or because, obviously he's Native American and he could do the investigation on his own, and you could have him looking through these books or asking people in the local tribe about what's going on, what's this all about, and then maybe he gets that information and he learns that this could very well be the work of a Wendigo. But instead, he just happens to have the book. Like, oh yeah, see, it's a Wendigo. See, here's the artwork of it. This is what it's all about. This is how you can kill it. He just tells you everything. And I don't know, it just didn't feel earned. It would have been better if Graham Greene's character would have been the one that became obsessed with stopping the Wendigo. Because obviously his character is Native American. He's also the former sheriff. And this has happened in his town. Even though he's no longer sheriff, you really can't take the cop out of the man, even if he's retired. And this may have been a new spark in him to get him out there to try and stop the Wendigo. So I think that they really sidelined Graham Greene's character, and they could have given him more in this movie. And one of the things they could have done is have him doing way more investigating stuff, and even having him be the one that ultimately, leads to the final confrontation between the Wendigo. But the sheriff and the deputy, once again, the sheriff is Kerry Russell's brother in the movie, the teacher, brother, siblings. They make some stupid decisions, the sheriff and the deputy. And whenever Kerry Russell takes Lucas back to the house, so Kerry Russell's character, Jesse's character, the brother, sister, deputy, teacher, they live in their parents' home, right? And Kerry Russell takes Lucas back to their house, and they're waiting for the brother to arrive because he had to go see the mayor. He couldn't call the mayor on the phone. So it's late at night. There's fog. It's all eerie. So something's going to go down. The deputy's the first to show up at the house, and he starts hearing these howling noises, and he's walking towards the shed, and all he has on him is a pistol. I don't know if it's a 1911 or a 9mm or a Glock, but it's not going to be enough to stop the Wendigo. He walks into the shed because he sees a box with something moving in it. I'm thinking it's going to be like a rodent, that's going to be like a cat or a raccoon, but it turns out to be Aiden. Aiden's the one in the box, which is Lucas's younger brother. And it's kind of a distraction because, like, the deputy gets hit from behind. This is the one time I jump scared. So I only jump scared once. But there's a few others, but that was the only one I jump scared. I had these antlers just go right into the back of the deputy, killing him dead. Then you have the sheriff show up a few minutes later at the house, right? And, he notices that, there's a dead body at the shed, or, somebody's laying on the ground. Obviously, it's his deputy. He puts on his body armor, but he only has a pistol, even though inside the house, Kerry Russell's been trying to get into the gun rack because they do have other guns, some rifles, probably some shotguns. But for some reason, her brother decides to have locks on the guns. Even though at this point they have neither one of them have kids. Jesse's character doesn't have any kids or a family of his own, and Kerry Russell's character doesn't have any kids or a family of her own. It's just brother and sister living in this house. So what's with the locks, right? I mean, you can have a lock for the gun cabinet, but individual locks for the guns and the rifles and the shotguns. So not once do they bother unlocking these weapons and using this arsenal against the Wendigo. Nah, instead of going inside and first checking on his sister and Lucas to make sure they're okay, what does Sheriff Jesse do? And I know that's not the name of the character. I think his name's Paul in the movie. He decides to do the exact same thing the deputy does. And I was just thinking NPCs, right, in a freaking, video game. Like, oh, you kill one NPC here, and then another NPC shows up at the exact same spot. Moron. So you think the challenged sheriff would be a little smarter than this. And, he seems pretty competent. Until this point, he walks up into the shed, and then he also gets attacked by the Wendigo. Instead of getting run through by the antlers, he basically gets sideswiped from behind, knocked into a wall, and then while he's up against the wall of one of the shed, then he gets hit by the antlers, but it only hits his arm, and so it does wound him, but it doesn't kill him. And then I think the sheriff gets like a metal pipe or something and then injures the Wendigo, and then Lucas is like, no, I'm going to run off with the Wendigo because the Wendigo is actually my dad. And so Lucas leaves the house, Aiden leaves. I guess the Wendigo picks up his boys and takes them off to the mine. And of course, they know that they're going to go to the mine because the sheriffs found the other half of the other dude's body at the mine earlier, which was their math lab. So Kerry Russell decides, okay, instead of taking my brother to the hospital, I'm just going to patch him up, and we're going to go straight to the mine in the middle of the night in the darkness to confront the Wendigo. Do they bother getting reinforcements or calling the state troopers or the Army National Guard or the military? No. Do they bother to round up a militia or local posse? No. Do they even go into the gun cabinet to grab any rifles or shotguns and the ammo? No, they don't. They just take the one pistol that the sheriff has and a flashlight. And the brother stays in the truck, like his police truck. And then she, Kerry Russell's character, the teacher with her plot armor, she goes inside to find Lucas and Aiden and confront the Wendigo, who's eating a bear, by the way. So, yeah. So the Wendigo's just sitting there, just numbing on a bear. I think it was a black bear. And Lucas is hanging out, Aiden's hanging out. And she notices Lucas and Aiden, but she doesn't notice this big giant Wendigo with antlers on it. And then she finally does. She puts the light on the Wendigo, and then we finally get to see a good look at the Wendigo, and it does look really cool. So I don't know how much influence Del Toro had on the design of the Wendigo, but it looked awesome for the most part. But this final battle between Kerry Russell's character, the teacher, versus the Wendigo is pathetic, because the only thing she has is her flashlight at the moment and her pistol. So she shoots her brother's pistol. I think she wounds the Wendigo a little bit, and then she falls back, and there happens to be a box of torches laying on the ground. So she grabs a torch, a flare, whatever you wish to call it, and she's trying to burn him. And then I think she picks up a pipe, and then she starts stabbing the Wendigo. And then up until this point, Lucas was doing everything he could to protect his father as well as his brother. Even when his father transformed into a Wendigo, he still wanted to be with his father and his brother, even if it was going to be down in a mine shaft, right? So all of a sudden, Lucas decides to pull out his knife and stab the Wendigo. And then the Wendigo's badly injured. It falls to the ground. And then Kerry Russell takes the knife and she starts ripping the Wendigo open, because the only way you can actually kill the Wendigo, according to the former sheriff, played by Graham Greene, is to rip out the heart. And that's exactly what she does. But aha! The Wendigo had already possessed Aiden, the younger brother, because I guess the younger brother had already consumed probably the principal, right? He had a little principal snack along with his dad. And so he starts transforming very slowly into, I guess, a mini Wendigo. But before he can fully transform into the Wendigo, well, teacher kills the little brother. Even though Lucas was trying to stop her, she was like, no, I have to do this, blah, blah, blah. And so she hugs Aiden, and then she stabs, I guess, Lucas from behind. And so they flash back to like a day later, a couple days later, by the lake, outside the small town in Oregon. By the way, once again, it does look beautiful, this cinematography, the look and feel of the movie. And so it's, the sheriff and teacher, brother-sister duo. They've survived. Obviously, they got some injuries. The brother has a bit more injuries. His arm is in a sling, so he's obviously survived. Lucas has survived, so it looks like he's going to get, I guess, adopted by the teacher, Kerry Russell's character, and they're going to take him in. But, of course, at the very end of the movie, the sheriff starts coughing, which is alluding to something, obviously, because he was injured by the Wendigo, which means he's going to be possessed by the Wendigo. And I guess that opens the door for a sequel to Antlers. The idea of possessing one person at a time really doesn't work for me. I think it would have been better if it was more like werewolves or vampires, where if you were infected by the Wendigo, whether bitten or wounded by its antlers, and you survived, then there was a chance you too were going to become a Wendigo and develop a craving for human flesh. And once you had human flesh, then that would ultimately transform you into the Wendigo. That's the way it should be. So there should have been a few more Wendigos running around besides the one, because you have one at the beginning, the mine shaft Wendigo, which Lucas's dad and his business partner encounter while in the mines, who rips the business partner in half and leaves half of him in the mine and the other half in the woods for Graham Greene's character to eventually find. So it makes you wonder, well, what happens to that Wendigo? Because he obviously consumed most of the friend of Lucas's father, and took half of it with him to the woods, while Lucas's dad takes Aiden back to the house to lock himself up. So it's all flashbacky, timey-wimey. So does the first Wendigo just die, and then Aiden's and Lucas's dad becomes the Wendigo? Or is there multiple Wendigos out there? I think it would make more sense for them to be multiple Wendigos, to be honest. That it doesn't simply go possession from one person and then to the next person when that body dies. It seems ridiculous. So that's the way I think they should have done it. So we should have had at least 3 or 4 Wendigos in this movie. The first Wendigo, which is in the mine, which we never really see too well. We never have a proper explanation as to what happens to that Wendigo. So maybe it's still out there in the woods. And then, of course, Lucas's dad, and then Lucas's little brother, Aiden. It would have been creepy if he actually had turned into a smaller Wendigo, running around, a little tiny, creepy Wendigo out there for them to kill. And then ultimately, the teacher's brother, the sheriff, played by Jesse Plemons. I guess he's going to become the Wendigo in a sequel, if there happens to be a sequel to this movie, which I highly doubt. I don't think there needs to be a sequel because, once again, it didn't do as well at the box office, $18 million. And it started off pretty solid. It built up pretty well, had some pretty decent characters, but at the end, a weak third act, not enough horror scenes. There should have been more Wendigo action. More people should have been hunted down and killed by the Wendigo. Even if it was just like random people, like in like a Friday the 13th movie or a Halloween movie. You always have these random people that just get killed by the killer. Totally fine. Like I said, it could have been another hunter out there, or a group of hunters, deer hunting, or bear hunting, or it could have been just somebody living out in a cabin, or some people out hitchhiking or biking in the middle of the woods, and they just get hunted down and murdered by the Wendigo. It just would have been cool to have 2 or 3 additional kills in this movie, especially with how short the movie was. So that would have been awesome. I would have liked to see more from Graham Greene's character, because Graham Greene is always awesome on the screen, whether it's a TV, movie, or once again voicing Rains Fall in Red Dead Redemption 2. And I think he should have played a key role in the final confrontation between him and the Wendigo. Kerry Russell's teacher character could have been involved in that. It could have been her and the sheriff teaming up against the Wendigo. That would have been cool. But the former sheriff does get sidelined after he tells the brother and sister teacher sheriff duo what's going on, with all the information available from his little RV. So overall, yeah, it had potential to be awesome and a really good horror film, and it definitely has its moments, and I do love the acting, the cinematography, the characters, the look and feel, and the creature design itself were great, but it could have been way better. So if you don't have HBO Max, or you have no intention of getting HBO Max, then I guess the only way you could watch Antlers is maybe renting it through Redbox, if there's still Redbox in your area. We don't have Blockbuster anymore. I don't even think the last Blockbuster exists anymore. There was one left in Alaska, of all places. So yeah, so that's overall how I feel about Antlers, as somebody that would have liked a really good, solid horror franchise revolved around Wendigos. Unfortunately, this is not exactly a good start for a hypothetical potential Antlers series, but then again, somebody may pick it up, right? And say, hey, I saw potential in the first movie. Scott Cooper did some good things. He did some bad things, but maybe they can make Antlers 2 even better. And I hope that's the case. And maybe they will. Maybe they'll focus more on the horror elements and have the next Wendigo, which would be obviously Jesse Plemons' sheriff, turning into a Wendigo. Maybe his Wendigo would be actually out there doing a lot more, horror killings throughout the woods. And perhaps the first Wendigo we encounter at the mine in the beginning of the movie is still out there in the woods as well. So maybe Antlers 2 would revolve around 2 Wendigos instead of 1 at a time. That would make more sense in my opinion. But for all of you that watched Antlers, now I want to know what you think. Your thoughts, your views, your opinions regarding Antlers. As always, welcome below in the comments section.